Hi guys, I'm Andy. Welcome back to Backpacking UK. Hiking, backpacking and wild camping your thing. Please hit that subscribe button because that's what this channel's all about. Right, today I get to pitch and review the Tarptent Scarp 1. It's been a long time coming, this has. I've had this out in all sorts of conditions. I've had it out in the heat, I've had it out in the cold, I've had it out in the rain, and I've had it out in the wind too. I used it for my 3 days solo wild camping in the Lake District. If you're interested in that, put links to that at the end of this video and also in the description too. So today I'm going to pitch the Tarptent Scarp 1 with the cross poles as well, because I think you're missing the trick if you don't buy these. The cross poles add an extra 445 grams to the tent, which all in weighs 1,472 grams, and that's all in. That's including tent pegs, guy lines, the lot. So it's such a good tent, but I do have some issues with it, which I will share with you at the end. So here's what you get inside the Tarptent 1 tent bag, packed up. It's 46 centimetres by 13 centimetres, uses a single 9mm aluminium pole from Easton. It pitches inner and outer together, so if it's raining you're not going to get the inner wet. Also means it goes up nice and quickly. Now you will have to buy your tent pegs separately and your guy lines. These are the Easton tent pegs, really high quality. They're super light. They don't look it, but they really are. So I use these for the sides of the tents and these for the ends of the tent. So let's start pitching the Tarptent Scarp 1. Right, so I'm going to start pitching this backpacking tent and just go into loosely peg out the 4 corners before I put the main pole through. Right, so I'm going to start threading the single pole through the middle of the tent. Now you've got to be really careful threading this tent pole through, because the sleeve which it goes into is really thin fabric and there's not a lot of space for this tent pole to go in. It quite often catches. If the tent pole gets wet, it's really difficult to put in. Now just going to pop the tent up, carefully pushing the pole through the sleeve. So now I'm just going to bring down that fly to the floor. You've got a little adjuster on each side to get that fly really nice and taut, get it close to the ground. It's going to make a big difference in winter. Now just going to guy it out properly. I'm also going to use the adjusters on the corners and at the ends to get that fly really nice and tight. So let's take a look around the Tarptent Scarp 1. It's an absolutely cracking backpacking tent. Now I've added these additional guy lines on the sides. It's also got a modification at the top to hold the crossing poles and a bit of reinforcement too, because that is a weakness on this backpacking tent. Now what I love about the Scarp 1 is the corners and the ends have individual guy line adjusters. That's absolutely superb, means you can pitch it really well every time. It's got an additional 2 poles in the corner and 1 pole in the middle. Just gives you more height at the ends, more height for your head, so it's less claustrophobic. Just uses that one big pole. There's 2 doors, 2 vestibules for a solo tent. That's almost unheard of. You see very few tents like that. Now it's also worth noting that it's got these little hoods on each door and it's got fully waterproof zips, although there's no storm flap, and these are the adjusters at the bottom. Now before I add the crossing poles, just want to say, if you have no intention of using crossing poles, take these off. You must take these off because these will flap about in the wind and you'll get no sleep at all. And this little guy loop here, this is if you want to use your trekking poles just to hold up the fly, and it just helps a little bit in the wind too. Right, so I'm going to start fitting the crossing poles. So you've got two separate poles that go crossways. Now these do not touch the floor. If these touch the floor, you're using these wrong. So I've threaded the crossing poles through the centre of the tent. They're in the special little eyelets at each end. I've also velcroed them on the top corners too. So now what I want to do, just want to push it through, make sure it's bending, bring it down and use the other eyelet too. Now I'm going to start clipping the fly to the poles. Now why use the crossing poles? Now the literature say it's all about snow loading. Personally, I think it's a load of rubbish. Yes, it's good for snow loading. What it is excellent for is the wind. It's absolutely superb. If you're into your summit camping or mountain camping, I would highly recommend getting these. Yes, it does add another 445 grams, but I'm telling you it's well worth it. So here's a quick look at the tent with the crossing poles fixed. So one of the ventilation options on this tent, you can just unzip the ends like so and then pull up, guy it back down, and it lets air flow through the ends of the tent. Okay, so let's have a look inside the Tarptent Scarp one. So I'm gonna zip this all the way to the top. It's got a dual zipper. You can choose either a see-through mesh inner or a solid mesh inner. This is the solid mesh inner. It's perfect for UK use. It's nice and high, so you're not going to get that chilly breeze ripping through the tent. It's also got a fair amount of see-through mesh at the top, which really does help with ventilation. Now, one of the features I absolutely love about the Tarptent Scarp one is you can change the depth, the width of the inner. So you can create a nice big vestibule. You've also got a little clip here for your door, so the door doesn't ride up the zip. So the fabrics used on the Tarptent Scarp one are a 30D nylon fabric for the bathtub floor, a 30D for the fly, and a 10D for the inner. Both the fly and the bathtub floor have a hydrostatic head rating of 3000. So inside this backpacking tent, we've got 3 hooks at the top for lanterns or lines. As you can see, there's loads of solid mesh. This is the solid mesh version. You've got 2 pockets, one on either side at the ends. So inside the Tarptent Scarp one, if you've got the inner closed to maximise the size of the vestibules are 51 centimetres and the width of the inner is 81 centimetres. So for a 1-person tent, the inner will take really wide sleeping pads, and you've still got 2 51 centimetre vestibules as well. But it also means when the inner is fully expanded out, you've got this enormous space inside the Scarp one. It's almost like a 2-person tent. So the height inside this tent is 99 centimetres in the middle with 38 centimetres on either side. Now if I'm fully extended, my head is just touching the peak of the inner. Now I'm 5'8", 172 centimetres. I'm now sort of sitting a bit slouched as I usually would, and you know, there's a reasonable amount of space above my head. So first of all, what do I love about the Tarptent Scarp 1? Number one, the space. For a solo tent, it's got so much space. I absolutely love it. You know, you'd usually expect space like this from a freestanding dome tent, which tend to weigh more. However, the design of this is absolutely superb. You know, it's just the right amount of ceiling height. You've got a bit more height at the ends. You've got this flexible inner, so it caters for the people who like to store their gear inside or outside the tent. Me, myself, what I tend to do is pull this in. I'll have like wet gear on one side, and then I can do my cooking on the other side. It's absolutely brilliant. Also love the fact it's got two doors, two vestibules, so if the wind changes direction, I can just cook in the other side of my tent. The design is just cracking, so much thought's gone into it. This is the 2022 version, which has little upgrades on previous versions, and all those like little niggles that people have, they do try to fix some of those little problems. One of the things that I like about it, it is a 4-season tent. I mean, the fly could do with coming a little bit closer to the ground. You potentially could have a little bit more solid mesh, but for me, I mean, I've used this in the cold and I haven't been cold in it, so this tent works really, really well. And the ventilation at the ends with the little hoods here, with a bit more see-through mesh here, that works really well too. Now, I see the Tarptent Scarp 1 as a true all-season backpacking tent. You can buy a completely see-through mesh inner or a solid inner, so you could have both. You can have it with or without the crossing poles. You can even buy carbon crossing poles as well, which weigh 280 grams, so if you want to save a bit of weight there, you can do. I think the lightweight package, either without the crossing poles, 1,472 grams, that's a really light backpacking tent, especially for a tent that you can use in most conditions. Add those crossing poles, you know, what's that, just under 1.9 kilos for a real sturdy 4-season tent. Under 2 kilos, I think that's really, really good. I really do. So what don't I like about the Tarptent Scarp 1? There's some quality issues with this. This was factory seam sealed, not that well. In fairness to Tarptent, they said they would pay for some seam sealant for me, but I'd have to do it myself. That could have been better. The fixings, obviously it's a lightweight tent, you've got small fixings, they're okay. You've got little things like there's a seam straight through the middle of the tent, which is a ridiculous design, and it is a design flaw in my opinion. I don't care what anyone says, that's a design flaw. One of the times I used this, water came through the seam on my brand new sleeping pad. I was absolutely fuming. Now I've seam sealed it myself, I've got this huge slug now which goes straight through the middle of my tent. The only benefit to that is it keeps my sleeping pad in place, but I'm not happy about this. The other thing is with the poles, on those eastern poles, the little plasticky fixings at the ends had little burrs on. That combined with the really, really thin material on the sleeve that the pole goes through meant somewhere down here I pierced the fabric. I was absolutely fuming again. It was the first time I pitched the tent and I've put a hole through it. That's not good enough quality. 1, the tent pole ends shouldn't have burrs on. 2, this material should be way thicker. That's ridiculous. They should have a look at Terra Nova tents if they want some inspiration on how to fix that problem. But you know, there are little bits and pieces that aren't quite right. If they fix them in the future, this could potentially be the best backpacking tent in the world. So the 2022 Tarptent Scarp one, which is this model, and it happens to be the latest model as well, will set you back $459. That's including like the guys, the pegs and the crossing poles as well. Unfortunately for us in the UK, you're going to have to pay VAT, duty and delivery on that. $459 somehow becomes £550 sterling. However, that's still good value for money. It is a lot of money, but tents are going through the roof at the moment, and £550 for a tent like this is good value for money. So would I recommend the Tarptent Scarp one? Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. So if you want to see this tent in action, please check out my 3-day solo in the Lake District video. I hope to see you wild camping soon. Cheers.